why don't we go ahead and start? Thank you all for coming and joining us. I'm so grateful that Catherine Brown is here with us, and we'll
Wait,
be starting us off.
Are you introducing me, introducing you?
I am. It's like...
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Brown. I'm a parent volunteer here at Pitzer, and I've been a member of the Family Leadership Council for the past 3.5 years, I think. My son is a member of the class of 2020. He is now halfway through his first year of law school and doing great and feeling very, very well prepared. I would like to start the session by introducing our wonderful speaker, Professor Cathy Yep. Professor Yep is the Professor of Asian American Studies at Pitzer. She's been with the college since 2004. She received her PhD and master's degree from University of California, Berkeley. Her recent courses include racial politics of teaching, nonviolent social change, health inequities, community health, and methodologies. Thank you so much for joining us for this session titled Part of Something Larger, Integrating Contemplative Practices to Combat the Public Health Epidemic of Loneliness in the Context of Social Inequities. Please join me in welcoming Professor Cathy Yep.
Thank you, Catherine, for that lovely introduction. And thank you so much for coming today. I really just want to thank the Advancement Office and their team of folks for putting together the Family Weekend and coming together. So let's give hands or some appreciation for Advancement for putting this together. So what I thought we'd do today is I thought we'd talk a little bit about an overview of this research project and sort of some basic definitions and concepts. And then we would move into really weaving together this conceptual framework to an actual practice of mindful movement. And then we have time for just discussion. And we're going to do this in our 45, 50 minutes together. So I thought I'd begin with just talking a little bit about myself to contextualize my scholarship and my teaching and my way of being in the world. So I'm the granddaughter of Franchi and Gim Yep, and my grandfather is actually depicted here. This is when he was 8, and he actually immigrated from China in the early part of the 20th century. And this is when he was this was actually his immigration photo, and he was immediately detained and interrogated in Angel Island. And this is a young adult historical novel about his experience. And then my grandmother grew up in West Virginia. She's 4th generation, lived almost till 102. And the book on the left is actually about her experiences in the 1930s in San Francisco, Chinatown, where she was a basketball player. And it was really looking at the ways in which working class women like my grandmother used their bodies and sport as a form of embodied feminism, as a form of empowerment. And really the running thread behind these stories is really looking at how people with limited resources can create a sense of belonging and a sense of change. So the young adult novel with my uncle is really thinking through, working through the apparati of the state, mitigating who is citizens and who is not, through the lens of his story. And then the book on the left is really how are people creative with limited resources and how our bodies hold traumas, but also are sources of empowerment through movement in that way. As Catherine mentioned, I teach classes like racial politics of teaching, and more recent years, I've been teaching more classes like health inequities and community health and the social theory of Thich Nhat Hanh, and really taking this idea of how people with limited resources create change in the arena of health, and health is socially constructed. I tend to teach classes that have a community-based component. So pretty much every semester in my 16, 17 years at Pitzer, we have worked with community partners and learned from community partners. The picture on the left is from a longtime community partnership, probably over 12 years now, in the city of Monterey Park, and where we learn from and teach immigrant and refugee elders. And this is a deep conversation this group is having where they're talking about their community project they're going to do. I think almost everyone all the students in that picture went on and are now actually medical doctors or are currently med students at USC, UPenn, et cetera. And so it's a way of thinking about the social context of medicine. So I'm actually excited to talk about this project because I haven't had a chance to really share it out. I'm currently on sabbatical and I'm a visiting scholar at UCLA. And I'm working alongside the Mindful Awareness Research Center that's housed in the Semel Institute of Neuroscience and Human Behavior. And what I'm doing with this project is weaving together thinking about mindfulness practice, mindfulness as sort of noticing on purpose, the present moment without judgment, and thinking about mindfulness as a tool for community health. I'm drawing from a tradition, here pictured on the right, from Wild Goose Qigong. And I've been practicing and learning and teaching Wild Goose Qigong for about 25 years. My teachers were people who came from the lineage holder of Yang Mei Jun, who's pictured here. She lived till 100 plus. And originally Wild Goose Qigong was passed along patrilineally. But then during the war in the 20th century, all the men were at war, so her grandfather decided to teach her in secret. So they would practice Qigong on the rooftops at night. And she kept on practicing, kept the tradition, and then around mid-70s, early 80s, she decided to shift the discourse and shift the way in which knowledge was shared, and she actually taught it in the public parks. And my teacher, Paul Lee, actually learned from her in a public park. And so I was lucky enough to learn from him while I was in graduate school. So these are sort of the two threads that I'm bringing into this research project and this talk today. So principles and practices for our today's session with us all together is just an invitation for you to try it on, like see how it fits, take away stories and not names. And really, I'm encouraging participation, and that could be in the Zoom chat, and you're welcome to unmute when we have time to talk with each other. And then just the ask for the principle of non-harm, right? So non-harm to self and others, and then we can sort of have this intention to share the space in that way. So the talk was part of something larger, and thinking about weaving contemplative practices to mitigate or address loneliness. Loneliness is a public health epidemic, and in the context of social inequality. So those are the three big things, right? So contemplative practices like mindfulness or Qigong. The second is loneliness. And the third is in the context of inequities. So when we think about loneliness, sometimes it gets conflated with social isolation. And while they're interwoven with each other, loneliness in many perspectives is about perception. So this is a quote from Dr. Murthy, who is the former Surgeon General. And if I could get a volunteer to read it out loud, that would be great. And Amanda, can I call on you and invite you?
Yeah, sure. We feel separated from other people, whether that's because we don't have the connections around us that we used to have, or because we're feeling othered and made to feel inferior and isolated. We enter into this stress state because we're worried about our safety. Our focus turns increasingly. We also become hyper-vigilant, more likely to perceive threats around us, and we also experience this erosion of self-esteem as overtime.
Thanks, Amanda. And thanks, Suara. I missed your hand. I appreciate your volunteering too. So what you see in this definition of loneliness is sort of a couple of components. And one is about perception of self with others, but also in relation to external structures. And it's activating both the stress state of fight or flight, but also and hypervigilance, but also the ways in which that hypervigilance to a threat, like some other social factors, can work inward. And so I would like us to think about that shifting back and forth. It's a big shift. It's like a weight shift back and forth. And that's a good metaphor for thinking about the Qigong practice itself. So if we go from defining loneliness, we know that loneliness is rising. So Cigna did a national study in 2018. And then they did a national study again, they repeated it in 2019. And it's roughly about 10,000 adults in the US. And they did a survey and they used UCLA's loneliness study scale. And what they found is from 2008 to 2019, and this is before COVID, there was a 13% increase among adults who felt lonely. And within that, if you disaggregate the data even more, what was interesting was the different generational moments of loneliness happening, but also rising pre-COVID, 2018 to 2019. So what they found is for Gen Z, which is designated as between ages 18 to 22, 79% responded as feeling lonely. And for millennials, 23 to 38 ages, that is the years, was 71%. And then they've done smaller studies during COVID and during this period of 2020, 2021, but there's no comparable national study. But for the smaller studies, what they're seeing is, and this is from a different entity than Cigna, this is through Social Pro and Value Penguin, is that they found that 30% of adults felt lonelier than usual and 47% felt lonelier than usual. And that also mirrored the Gen Z and the millennials, so those were higher. So what we know is that qualitatively and experientially, there can be loneliness in this period of COVID and also pre-COVID, but definitely in COVID now. But then we're also seeing that parallel or correlate with existing data that from national studies. So in addition that loneliness is rising, that we know that loneliness impacts health. And specifically the research area that I'm looking at is loneliness and its correlation to insomnia, the inability to fall asleep. You wake up in the middle of the night and you can't fall back to sleep, or you wake up and not rested. And what the research is showing is that the correlations or the associations with loneliness to insomnia, you see really startling effects on heart health, blood pressure, inflammation response, and gene expression. The other key piece of loneliness is that it's not just psychological. It isn't just an internal individual thing. What we're seeing is the ways in which loneliness is both interplayed and impacted by structures, as well as the internal response to that. So we can see that in COVID, the ways in which health equities are and structural barriers are playing out in housing, state policies, et cetera. My community partner for this project is working alongside and learning from folks impacted by immigration detention centers and the carceral state. And as you know, the largest immigration detention center is very close to Claremont. It's less than 60 miles away. And what we see reported out from stories from our community partners and folks that they're working with and learning from is maybe someone asks for masks or disinfectants in the detention center, and then they're put in solitary confinement. So that could be interpreted, loneliness is a psychological thing, like how did they work against that challenging situation? What was their resilience factor? Or there could also be a structural element. So when we think about COVID-19 is thinking about not just treating the virus and not just treating the systems like jumpstarting the economy, but also thinking about mental health. So I started off this talk with thinking about we're part of something larger is both an individual ask of us to think about, but also thinking about a policy measure. So that metaphor of the drop in the ocean is an interesting metaphor of thinking about going back and forth with upstream and downstream factors in relation to public health. So what we did is working with this community partner that is learning from folks impacted by immigration detention in the carceral state is thinking about how do we make contemplative practices culturally relevant, accessible, and addressing both systems and individuals. So what we did is combine the ancient knowledge of Qigong and also modern science. So what we know in Qigong in terms of the literature of thousands of years is this idea of connecting different systems together. From a modern science perspective, and particularly there's a lot of research emerging out of UCLA, is that it addresses loneliness, mindfulness, and particularly Qigong practices addresses loneliness, and also insomnia and depression in various different populations. And they've done this with populations that are cancer patients, populations of different age groups and different age cohorts. So those are the two threads and the two main things that we're looking at. So what we did is we've done relational mindfulness and mindful movement. Relational mindfulness was this idea of being fully present or trying to be present with others in pairings and groupings. And this happened in particular when I was formerly the Associate Dean of Faculty around 2017 to 2019 under the previous presidential administration. We were having dynamics where there was a lot of conflict both outside to inside and with inside around different social locations. And so the relational mindfulness was a way to continue to build capacity for resilience, but also for building community of what our educational objectives were at Pitzer. What I've done more recently with the mindful movement was thinking about how to offer Qigong as a sort of community health education model. And then we had this grand plan and then COVID came. So we had to shift online. So we've been offering weekly to bi-weekly classes for free since March. So there's a couple of participants on the call as well. And the idea is to do sort of more popular educations of small short videos available on YouTube that's woven with a trauma-informed curriculum by Capacitar that work from and learn from refugees from all over the world. And it's translated into 30 to 50 languages. So we're weaving those together. So the components are a live online class, videos, and then also the curriculum itself. And people are able to utilize that in different ways that make sense to them and then share it with others. So what we've seen in the impact, at least for, I'm going to talk about the Qigong part of it in terms of mindful movement. And these are just some quotes that are more qualitative initially. And these are folks that are either directly impacted by immigration detention or people who've been participating in the Qigong group. And the first quote was, "I just didn't realize I needed to breathe." And that context of this person who is working with and learning from folks where they're mediating housing security, food security in the context of shifting politics around citizenship. This was an important practice for them and also an awareness of what their current state was. Another participant talked about, "It's what I look forward to." So they've been coming every week since March. And we've had anywhere from 30 to 50 people to 10 people. And it's interesting to have familiar faces and then see everyone moving together on the screen. The last sort of quote that I chose was someone talked about, "There's something that I don't have words for yet." And so there's a ways in which we're experiencing loneliness, we're experiencing a sense of disconnect, and we don't yet have an articulation for it, or there may be social conditions where there is not the possibility to express them. So what we're seeing is that there's a beginning of naming, of making things that are less visible more visible. There's also a shift to seeing what are the causes of them, but also a commitment to a process of unfolding what those are. So the takeaways at this initial point is that studies like this tend to be, I'm working with a population of this age group, and I'm going to see a pre and a post of the impact. And what I've learned over this last year is that it's really shifting our research methodology models, that it may not be about measuring the impact of something because it's involved a range of stakeholders. So we had people of different ages come, different generations. We have multiple generations of the same family come. The staff of different organizations that are just burnt out from doing community organizing. This has been an important piece as well. So the intergenerational piece. And then the last thing I'll say is trauma-informed and paradigm shift. So this idea of that so many folks are just going through stuff. And it's really important to have it rooted in choices and understanding that when people show up to breathe, there's many different histories that are coming into the room as well. And the last thing I'll say is the paradigm shift is it's more than a treatment for insomnia. So the part of something larger is a psychological component that we are connected with others, but there's something about thinking about this as a paradigm shift to not only how I decrease stress, but also how I think about a vision in the world. And so here's a quote from a participant of Qigong, but also is a feminist, anti-racist pedagogical scholar. She had this quote when we were talking about these Qigong sessions. And she said, when people connect the personal to something outside of themselves, when people connect history to their own story, when people listen and act from these connections, we nourish hope, critical thinking, and liberation. And when she said this, it just struck me as so much of a Pitzer approach to our educational objectives, theory and action, but that idea of connectivity, and that relates to the practice of returning to our breath, the connectivity of the inhale to the exhale, the connectivity of the self to society when maybe we may feel disconnected. So what I thought we'd do now is think about these ideas of connectivity or a drop in the water in relation to actually practicing. So what I invite you to do is you're welcome to choose whether you want your camera on or off. We have a couple of folks here who have been practicing for a while with us. So thank you for joining us too. And really the invitation is to practice with what makes sense for you, for your body, in terms of what range of motion and what you feel comfortable with. So I'm going to take a couple of movements from a set that I learned from my teacher, Dr. Hu and Paul Lee. And this set is 4,000 years old and another set is about 1,500 years old. And it's being interpreted in 2021 for Pitzer College Family Weekend. So whatever, you're welcome to sit or you're welcome to stand. And then what I'd like you to do is, I'm going to show you from standing. Let me just turn my virtual background off. And you're going to see my beautiful room. So you're welcome to sit or stand. And let us begin with having our feet about shoulder length apart. Let's just inhale through our nose and exhale through our mouth. Let's take 3 breaths, inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. Do one more breath, inhaling and exhaling. You might have your palms facing up. You might have them about waist high if you're standing, also waist high if you're sitting. And then when you're just going to lift, and then you're going to flip them over like pancakes and then have them drop down. You can go at your own pace. We don't have to be all synchronized. And what you're doing is you're lifting your palms up and you're inhaling, coming to about your shoulder, your heart, and then your hands are dropping down. Inhaling and exhaling. And we have different breath cycles, so work with your own breath. I invite you to come into the inhale as you lift, and then exhale and release as your hands fall down. And imagine it's like you're in water. You're lifting your hands up through water, and your hands are slowly moving through water as they exhale and release. invitation to come to your breath and to come to your breathing body. And if thoughts come up or questions or worries, just let them be there, just note them, and then return to your breath. Now I invite you to move in a way that makes sense for you. So right now we're going up and we're going down. You might try expanding and contracting. My nephew would call this the accordion qigong. Expand, contract. And you inhale as you expand, exhale as you come back. And imagine the pulsing like a jellyfish, maybe butterfly wings. And then you might try other directions that you're drawn to. It could be diagonal. It could be front and back. I'll show you from the side. The main concept is to come to your inhale and exhale with movement and the pulsing. You might play with the height. You might go higher, or you might go really small. Knowing there is no right or wrong way, there's no Scantron test, there's no competition. I'm not going to give the Pitzer College Family Weekend trophy for best Qigong practitioner. It's coming into your breath, your body, with kindness, gentleness, and knowing you know how to do this because you know how to breathe and you know how to move. You might inhale through your nose, exhale, release. Inhale, bring in, exhale, release, and let go. Let's do 3 more cycles of inhaling and exhaling. So 2 more. Inhale, exhale. 1 more. Inhale, exhale. When you're ready, pause. And if you feel comfortable, put your hand on your heart or your belly, or both hands on your heart or both hands on your belly. Just take a few breaths, feeling the rising and falling of your chest or your belly. And as thoughts come up, or if your mind begins to wander, am I doing this right? Am I doing it too slowly? What's going to happen next? Just let the mind wander back. And imagine your mind wandering away like a puppy that just sort of wanders to go smell something. Just come back. So it's that idea of bringing awareness to your breath and your mind, but with kindness. Let's take 3 more breaths. Two more inhales and exhales. One more inhale and exhale. So that opening move of lifting up or opening to the sides is an inhale and exhale. And in traditional Chinese medicine, or the way that I was taught from my teachers, it's an interesting way to open up entry points to different. So qi is energy, life force, and it exists everywhere, and it's the past, present, and future. And this idea of Qigong is that we are part of systems. So we are our own microsystem. We have different express ways of energy running through our own body with our own history. And it's also connected to other beings. So it's an interesting metaphor of part of something larger, and something larger is part of me. And it's maybe not just a metaphor, it's actually an epistemological system, a way of looking at the world, which is different than separate entities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite us to continue that practice of what we just did, of either lifting up or lifting down, and then I'm going to narrate thinking about how to connect with something larger, and something larger is a part of you. So we go back, and you're welcome to sit or stand. And remember, if we start with our palms up at our waist, and then we lift it up, and then we lift it down. So let's start there. So we're inhaling, and then exhaling. And it's interesting to get back into the breath and the rhythm of that movement. And if we add the layer of we're part of something larger, and something larger is a part of us, you might notice your connecting points. So your feet on the earth. So as you lift up, you're feeling your feet on the earth. As your hands go down, you feel something moving towards your feet. So then the motion becomes less hands, but it actually comes from the feet all up to your body, your hands, and lifting up, and then all the way down. So your hands, on some levels, are just a representation of the movement that's coming from your feet, up your body, down your body, back down your legs to your feet. So you're pulling up light from your feet, up your body, pushing out, releasing down your body to your feet. I'll show you from the side. So it could even be you kind of curve and then you straighten. Curve and then straighten. Another part of something larger, just in this motion, is thinking about your inhale and your exhale. And feel free to go to the side too, or go diagonal. It's just inhaling and exhaling. But if you go to the side, think of your chest and heart opening as you inhale. Opening, closing in. You know, the inhale, bringing in light through your nose and your hands and your chest. Exhale, releasing. What we're doing here is, this is the heart expressway. It's going along here, and we're opening and bringing it to a heart. Just showing you. So opening and closing. You may feel warmth or some temperature. You may feel a texture like electricity, like your foot is asleep and coming back. Let's do 2 more. So you have some choices here. You could do something larger related to your feet connecting to the earth, something larger related to opening your chest and closing it, something larger in terms of really expanding the inhale, and then exhale, release. So for the next few breaths, pick one thing that you want to focus on in terms of something larger. Your feet connecting, your heart opening, or your breath. Just try what it's like to focus on that one piece that you picked. Let's do 3 breaths. Two, inhale, exhale. 1, inhale, exhale. I invite you to put your hand back on your heart or your belly. It could be both on the heart or both on the belly, whatever you feel comfortable with. Just take 3 deep breaths. Feeling your chest rising, your belly rising. Notice any shifts in your body, or something that was amplified or something that was diminished. There might be one side that's speaking to you versus the other. Let's take 2 more breaths. One more inhale and exhale. And if you'd like, as we transition into discussion and reflection, you might wiggle your fingers, you might wiggle your shoulders, and we'll come back together as a group. And I'm going to invite you to take a moment to sort of reflect on what you experienced in that practice. And you're welcome to just share out in the chat or unmute and share. Here's some prompts if this is helpful. So during today's session, I would change that word. I learned, or I wondered, or I commit to, I appreciate, or something you experienced. And you're welcome to put in the chat. You're welcome to unmute and share. And knowing that it takes some time to transition from movement and breathing to formulating words, and then getting our brain online in that way, and then getting on the keyboard. So I built in some time, knowing that the session is going to end in 10-15 minutes. So we've got some time, we've got spaciousness. And I'm seeing some things entering here. Appreciate quieting the noise. Felt very relaxed, connected. Did I hear someone unmuting and sharing?
Yeah, that was me. It's Brenda.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm on staff at Pitzer. So I'll mention that something I experienced was feeling inspired to finally get myself to the sessions you offer. I see the invitation come around all the time, and I think about it, and I think 1 or 2 times I even announced I was going to go, and I haven't been. And the the opportunity to do this with you today and with everyone on in this session, I will get me there. So thank you.
You're always welcome, Brenda. And you know, it's an interesting hiccups to try to get there. Like even for myself, like I practice every day, but I need the structure. So this class actually helps me. We offer this Qigong first Wednesdays and third Thursdays through Pittsburgh. And we've been doing this throughout COVID-19, and we'll see how it's. Well, actually, did it before. Now that I think about it. So, but I appreciate the structure because it's actually accountability for me too. So yes, parents can join the session, family members, fan club members, animals can come. If you come, sometimes my dad comes and you can ask him questions too. He loves to talk about Qigong also. So everyone is welcome. It's really meant to be a space where we can generate energy or chi together and be in community during these COVID times, and then also beyond. So thanks. So other comments, other noticings, and feel free to unmute and share. Yes, Ceraria, the cat that joined momentarily. That was really beautiful. It was like, that made me so happy.
That was a frack, and I couldn't tell whether he came for the relaxation or to ask me to feed him. But he only got one of the two. It was interesting to notice how many of us, including me, started yawning as we started to relax.
How many other folks noticed that too? Yawning, yeah. You yawned a lot, Lisa?
Yes.
So think about different ways that we release, right? So Lisa, you have you practiced with Diana. So nice. Diana is the sort of visionary behind UCLA's Mindfulness Awareness Research Center.
It's so interesting when you said that at the beginning, because I didn't know, because I'm not familiar with you until today. But I figured that you knew her. That's why I put it in the chat. She does a very nice job, and it's nice. It's a half hour every Thursday through the Hammer.
And it's a live stream. It's a great opportunity for another practice if folks want to check it out. So let's see what. So what did people notice from the first time you practiced to adding the layer of some part of something larger, either through the feet or through the breath? How did that shift your practice or amplify something?
I think it deepens it. Right, you drop down deeper into it. So it's more expansive, but for me it becomes deeper then. And maybe that's just a question of longer too.
I see a couple head nods. Anyone want to add to what Lisa's saying?
I felt more grounded and more in that moment of when you're saying, you know, part of something larger. I'm like, yes, I am. Where prior to no, it's just like, oh, this is really great, to wow, yes. So yeah, I agree. It's much deeper, but my brain seemed to be more engaged, but in a calming way, not a frenetic way.
And that's such an interesting sort of dovetailing of calm alertness. Did I interrupt someone? Was someone going to say something? Amanda?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like for myself personally, I feel like I'm always stuck in my mind and my brain, but it helped me, it helped me flow down into my body and really connect with my body at the same time.
Cathy, for me, it's especially this one, it's always so beautiful to watch us make the movements of breathing. You know, it's so artistic and beautiful and calming. So.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Amanda. Both of you said something that's really interesting because it invites us to be whole. to be with our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. And sometimes I'm just so fixated on the news, or like I'm writing, or I'm engaging with something, that I feel like part of me is thinking about what am I going to make for dinner? What am I going to do this? And there's this interesting moment to experience being integrated in a whole, even just for those few months, and in community. So it was really beautiful to see you all moving. And like tenderness, like, oh wait, I can go diagonal. Oh wait, okay, I can go up. Like it, but even there was that willingness to just move and play. And there's an interesting thing to do that together with other people, versus this is a different experience if we're listening to an app and we're doing this alone in a room. So there's variations of what is the importance of the collective in this as well. We're at 4:50, and so we're gonna close in another 5 minutes. I want to open it up for a few more comments. I also breezed through my lecture part, and I realized I was yearning to practice with you. So if there's questions way back when, 40 minutes ago, when I talked a little bit about lecture piece, I'm also happy to answer those questions. Also happy to answer questions about Qigong or questions that we have for each other about this practice, how I integrate it with classes, etc. Linda Lamb is also on this call. She's the director of CAPAS, and she also is a deep practitioner too, and has been coming for a long time. So Linda, I'm not trying to just make sure like you answer all the questions, but really want to widen the circle of folks that want to chime in. Marianne's been practicing for a while as well, for almost the entire time since March. So Marianne is an expert too, so she's here to answer questions also. Marianne's like, no.
Could you talk maybe a little bit, going back to this notion of loneliness from the beginning, about the difference between being alone and loneliness? You can be with someone and be lonely, and be alone and not be lonely.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. That's such a good question. So part of it is, coming from dominant Western research methodologies, the definition of loneliness versus social isolation. So social isolation is literally quantified with contact. And loneliness can be more about self-perception. So you can still be around other people, but still have that sense of being disconnected, or a sense of being a target, or a sense of you're the cause of the target. And that goes back to Dr. Murthy's quote, which I thought was an interesting quote from the Surgeon General, right? Because here's a person in charge of thinking about health. And we often think of health as biomedical, or as individual, or a health as lack of illness. And actually his quote did a lot, because it unpacked the ways in which we're interwoven with all these different entities. And that's in the context of Black Lives Matter, that's in the context of heteropatriarchy, and the ways in which it can be, we are exposed to things, and then we also internalize things, and then that can have an impact on our health. And that can also be this way in which loneliness is socially constructed. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's very material, it's very real, but these other social factors that shape our feeling lonely, even if like we're completely surrounded by other people, we're constantly in contact, etc. It's a great question. Thank you, Lisa.
Is there a way of exploring these ideas with your undergraduate students that allows them to experience the feelings, express the ones that they have, see things from another perspective if they haven't experienced loneliness and isolation, without feeling confrontational?
That is such a beautiful aspiration and vision. And what I love, I feel so lucky to be able to teach at Pitzer in this particular political moment. And so when I was associate dean of faculty, when there was people getting hate mail, people being targeted, both inside the community, outside the community, what we did, and Linda Lamb was a part of this with Diversity Committee, is we had a model of diversity and equity inclusion that was about listening and was about transformative justice. And how do we hold space for ourselves and others in that similar model of inhaling and exhaling and points of contact that were part of something larger. So what we did is, and we include faculty, staff, and students and community partners, staff, and particularly we had day-long trainings, actually modeled a lot out of UCLA Mark. We had day-long trainings with monthly lunches. We had events during the semester where people learned to listen, but more importantly, they learned to speak. And they learned to speak from a place that was from their heart and from their wholeheartedness, knowing that they were going to be heard. So there was a moment towards the tail end of my term as the administrator where there was an incident that was targeting a minoritized community, and the procedurals of investigating it wasn't going to get at the heart feeling of being dismissed and of being dehumanized. And so I asked some folks who were part of the target group, they said, they had been practicing this. They took a class that I taught called Healing Justice. That was a half credit class. And we had students from Black Student Union, Rainbow Coalition, and they called basically the practice of relational mindfulness. And then we put a call out and 40 people showed up, faculty, staff, and students. And people got to share out what, from their different perspectives, how they felt harmed, what they asked for, what they wanted to restore that harm, and then also the vision for society. So I think there's room for us to really think about the different pedagogies that we can take concepts like anti-racism or liberation and really weave that in with practice. So certainly what's interesting about is this embodied practice is about inquiry. It's like, what am I feeling here? What am I noticing with this side? And we connect that with the social theories and the practice. Great question. Thank you. We are coming to a close, and that time went by so fast. So I am so grateful for you all to come with us. Next steps or options for you is you're welcome to come to mindfulness. We'll be meeting next Thursday. We're meeting first Wednesday, Thursdays. Our community partner, and I think our community partner actually just came on the call, they're having a Wednesday event as well that's looking at immigration detention, and they really imbue this sort of mindful approach to thinking about engaging in the world. So if you go to my website and if you sign up for the email list, then you'll get access to information of the community partner events as well as the Qigong events. So as we come to a close, I would love for you all just to check in with your breath and your body. So let's do a close. Let's rub our hands together because we generated some qi. There's some warmth. You're welcome to rub your hands, rub your face, your hair if you wish. And let's take 3 deep breaths together. You're welcome to stretch a little. And let's inhale and exhale. 2 breaths. One breath. So may our practice be for the benefit of all beings. And so may all beings be at ease with no exceptions, no one left out. Thank you so much for joining us together. I'll hang out for a couple minutes afterwards if people want to connect. Thank you, Deborah Lee, for being here. She's the executive director of our community partner Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. Thank you, Marianne, for coming in and willing to be like hanging out with us. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you Advancement for organizing this event.